Hi everybody. Today we're going to learn to use dummy variables in SAS. You might ask, what is a dummy variable? Well, a dummy variable is an indicator variable that usually takes on a value of something like 0 or 1. It's 0 in the absence or 1 in the presence of some sort of categorical effect that might be expected to change the outcome of the dependent variable, whatever that dependent variable is. Okay, today we're going to use data that we're familiar with. It's jewelry sales data. And so we're going to go ahead and import that data. So we go through the import process. It's an Excel workbook. I keep it on the desktop in a data folder called Data. The spreadsheet inside the Excel document that we want to look at is jewelry sales and DPI, or JS and DPI. And we're going to put it in the work directory, and we're just going to call it JS for short. And so there it is. We have the date, we have the amount of the sales, and we have disposable personal income that corresponds to those same dates. Now, SAS actually imported a couple of extra columns, but since there's nothing in it, in either one of them, we don't really have to worry about those. And so what we want to do is first we want to bring it in as a new data set, and I'm not going to use the original data set. I'm going to start off by renaming data to data 1, and so this creates a brand new data file called data 1, and we're going to set into that data file jewelry sales. If we run this, we see it creates a brand new data set. We can work with that data set without disturbing the data in the original data set. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is use SAS's date functions to create a variable called month that will hold information about which month of the year it is. Now we know that in the data set itself we've got the date variable, and it includes the month and the year, but all we need to know is which month of the year it is. And so we're going to say month is equal to month of the date variable. And when we run this piece, it's going to create a brand new column in our data set, and it's going to include the numerical representation of the month that we see here. So January is 1, February is 2, so on down to December is 12, and then it starts over again with the next year. Okay, so we now have a numerical variable that's going to be easier to work with, easier to visualize. And what we need to do now is create a new variable. Let's create a new variable called January to hold our dummy variable. And we're going to say January starts off as equaling 0. And so all values of January equal 0. But what we're going to do now is we're going to say if month equals 1, then January, Jan, equals 1. And so if we rerun that, we can look at the new data set, and now we have a January variable in there, and January is only 1 when we see January in the date. And so as long as this date is formatted as a SAS date, or if it's formatted in Excel as a date and it gets imported as a date, then you can use this month variable. We could also use a year variable in here if we like, but that's not what the lesson is about today. So what we need to do is create a bunch more dummy variables for each of the different months. And so what I'm going to do to save time is I'm just going to copy and paste those in. And so from February through December, we're going to copy and paste something similar so that we can use the program to create dummies for every month of the year. Now keep in mind, we're not going to ever use all 12 months in the year in a regression, because if we did, we'd have perfect collinearity between all of our month dummies, because once we knew it wasn't January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, then it must be December. So if we have 11 of these, it determines the 12th. So one of them would be perfectly collinear with all the rest. And so we're only going to use 11 of the 12 dummies in any regression that we run. Now we might, instead of doing monthly dummies, we may want to consider using quarterly dummies. So think about how we would create a quarterly dummy. We'd first need to start off by saying that quarter 1 equals 0. And so this gives us a new variable we'll call quarter 1, and it sets all values to 0. And then if we wanted the first 3 months to be in the first quarter, we could say if month equals 1 or month equals 2 or month, spelling is good here, equals 3, then QTR1 equals 1. Okay, so they start off all equaling 0, and then if the month falls into the first month, the second month, or the third month, then the first quarter equals 1. Let's run that. And what we can see is that not only do all the monthly dummies get created, so January is 1, February is 1 when February is in the month. If we look over, we can also see that quarter 1 only equals 1 if we find that the month is January, February, or March, and it's 0 everywhere else. Okay, so that first quarterly dummy got created correctly. Let's go ahead and copy and paste in the other 3 quarterly dummies. And so now we've got quarters 1 through 4, and we've got months 1 through 12. And let's run a regression. In fact, let's run a couple of regressions and see which one performs better. We're going to leave out January in the monthly regression, where we have sales equal to disposable personal income, and a function of disposable personal income February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and December. You notice that January is left out, so January becomes our reference month. All the coefficients for each of the different dummy variables are in reference to the month that was left out, and so that becomes our reference category. When we look at this in terms of quarterly dummies, then sales is a function of disposable personal income, quarter 2, 3, and 4. And so we left out the corresponding month in the earliest part of the year to try to estimate using quarterly dummies instead of monthly dummies. And so now all that's left to do is run these 2 regressions, and because these models are both part of the same proc reg, we don't have to worry about doing another proc reg and another model statement. And so what does our results indicate? Well, let's first look at our monthly dummy equation. What we see is that almost all of the months are statistically significant at about at least the 94% level. I'm sorry, the 4% level or higher. And so we've even got some that are statistically significant at well beyond the 1% level. And so most of these right-hand side variables are fairly statistically significant. So each of the months have a significant and distinct impact on the left-hand side variable. And what we can also say is that because all the monthly dummy variables have a positive coefficient, this means that relative to January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and December all have a positive impact on sales. So all of these months have higher sales than January. In terms of our R-square, we see that R-square and adjusted R-square are around 95, 96%. This indicates that we're explaining a good bit of the variation that's going on in jewelry sales with just these right-hand side variables. Now if we look down, we can see the regression output from that using the quarterly dummies, quarter 2, 3, and 4. Now we've still got the same basic information, but what we've done is we combined some of these months together to try to conserve on the number of right-hand side variables that we use in the regression. Makes it easier to look at. But what we see right off the bat is that quarter 2 and 3, when we lump these together, we don't get a statistically significant impact. So quarter 2 and quarter 3 by themselves don't really measure the movement that's going on in our dependent variable, the jewelry sales. Quarter 4 has a significant and large impact, but quarter 4 includes October, November, and December. And so when you lump those three together, it's significant, but may not be as good a predictor as we saw in the monthly dummies. What does give us an indication that this is not quite as well fit as the original data set with all the monthly dummies is that our adjusted R-square and our R-square are right around 40%. So it means that we're explaining less than half of the variation with these right-hand side variables in the quarterly dummy equation as opposed to those in the monthly dummy equations. And so the adjusted R-square helps us determine which one that we want to use here. And my pick would be this with the monthly dummies rather than with the quarterly dummies. And so this gives you an indication of not only how to create dummy variables, but it gives you an indication of how to compare the use of dummy variables between two separate equations. Now, technically speaking, you can't directly compare R-squares between these two equations, but what we can say is that we're explaining a lot more of the variation with the model that uses the monthly dummies as opposed to the model that uses only the quarterly dummies. Thanks for your attention, and I hope it helps.